Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm Tiaan Franken from Chocolate Tribe, and yeah, it's a great pleasure to be able to share with you guys some of the work we do and how we do approach our 3D environments and VFX productions at Chocolate Tribe. So yeah, looking forward to just give you guys a bit of insight. And to kick it off with, I've been in the industry for 20 years plus in South Africa. So it's been quite a journey to see how the industry's evolved over the years and all the challenges we kind of get along the way. I've been a character TD and TD across the duration of this time, but also project lead. And we've been kind of working on a lot of high-end adverts, episodic work, feature work. I'm very passionate about pipeline development, rigging, creature TD work, and very committed to kind of uplifting the local communities regarding the VFX and animation industry. So we've been doing this, and as mentors, we try to encourage the younger generation to see the potential of this being a viable career for them, especially in South Africa. So as Chocolate Tribe, who we are located in Cape Town and Johannesburg. It's been founded by Nosipho van der Bracht and Rob van der Bracht in 2014. And the core business has always been in film, television series, and advertising. And our passion has always been to push the envelope. And we've been fortunate to be awarded multiple awards over the years for the work we've been doing, and with the likings of Paramount, Netflix, Disney, Amazon, and kind of the well-known industries companies out there. And we've been very fortunate to being part of a lot of productions that really push us as a company, but also what is locally seen as the typical kind of productions coming out of Africa. We've definitely lifted the bar, and just want to show you a bit of the work we do. So Matt, if you don't mind sharing the show reel from our company. Thank you. That was a cut bit short. All good. So yeah, look, that gives you guys a bit of an insight on the kind of work we do and kind of the extent of the work we kind of push ourselves on. So the question you obviously will have is like, how's life in South Africa? How can we do this kind of productions locally and push this kind of productions forward? And there's always this typical kind of out view of what Africa is like and staying in Africa. Can we even do this down here? And yeah, to give you a bit of an insight on the culture and just what we do down here, it's actually very in line with what the rest of the world is doing. And the narrative that's normally out there is maybe it's more about poverty and not be able to have the technology or the ability to these kind of productions. But to be honest, it's a complete opposite kind of message that's out, or that should be out there, is that we have a very rich culture and a very rich way of looking at doing productions in a different way from an Africa perspective and point of view. And there's a lot of new kind of stories that can be told, and the way we tell our stories is different with a different flavor. And there's a saying in South Africa and across Africa, it's called Ubuntu, and it means being connected to the land. And it's such a powerful message because a lot of the content that you see out there in the world is almost like a misconnection from what really is happening. And we love just sometimes how raw sometimes the messaging or the content that can be created and the stylization, the textures that comes from us can be actually involved in our productions as well as the content development. So to take you across to a different type of lens to look at, like if we would imagine putting up a lens, and the typical lens people look at in South Africa or in Africa across, it's like it's dilapidated, it's a shanty towns, it's not the thriving first world country with no technology and no innovation. Another lens that people paint over is like they always coat us with just there's only animals here, zebras and elephants and lions, the typical stereotypes. Sure, we do have beautiful animals, but that's not the only stuff we have down here. And of course, the landscapes, the beautiful, majestic landscapes and stuff, and that is true as well. But there's again, it's not just documentaries that can be done in South Africa. There's a little bit more to us. And to be honest, the traditional portrayal of the kind of productions that's been seen in the world is your typical Lion Kings, Madagascar, even there was Zambezia and other productions happening locally. That's kind of just always the animal kingdom and presenting the animal world for so to say. And when it comes to film and VFX, you always get kind of the history or the apartheid or even blood diamonds, the rawness of the actual world and the elements. And to be honest, I want you guys to put up a different lens and look at South Africa and Africa in general out of a different perspective. A country with abundance, a lot of technology, flourishing kind of cities, growing cities, infrastructures being kind of reconstructed and new. We actually have one of the fastest growing young generation in the world. Like 75% of Africa's population is under the age of 35. It means it's a very young, thriving, upbeat kind of communities, and that's always wants to see new content to be developed and new ways of looking at creating content for that audience. So first of all, you have a massive market, and we're looking at 1.5 billion people in Africa alone that is consumers of content and new looking content. So again, I put up a different lens of looking at also data centers that's heavily being invested in South Africa and in Africa in general. You have a lot of data centers growing in Kenya. Also, virtual productions being constructed in South Africa, especially in Cape Town. There's a few productions that's going to happen through those kind of facilities. So what's nice about Africa is we do have infrastructure that can be upgraded very rapidly and faster than the typical infrastructure of being stuck in certain workflows and ways. Also, an interesting fact, South Africa is one of the countries that had the highest purchase of actual solar farm equipment. So we've got one of the biggest greenhouse, so to say, hardware in the world, and purchases in 2004 alone. So we obviously work off the grid. We have a forward thinking and a way of looking at the world differently. That's just from the infrastructure point of view. A thing that's very amazing about what we're quite excited about is we can see the younger generation being very excited and pushing the technology of game development, new ways of animation, new styles, authentic, local bound. And yes, of course, obviously bring our own flavor to all this. Obviously, some music genres has been kind of known for coming from Africa as Gqom and EDM, and then obviously Amapiano. It's quite unique, authentic kind of sounds and music. So there's just to kind of point out a few little things to look at that is a bit different than people would normally think when they think of Africa. And then, of course, the potential of doing co-productions. We have many small companies, but also medium-sized businesses that's flourishing at the moment, and also projecting up to 5 years forward of productions coming to Africa in general. So us as Chocolate Tribe, we've been around for 10 years, and we've been pushing the boundaries on the VFX side and the animation side. These are some of the productions we've been working on. And this is actually Robot and Scarecrow. That was a production that really pushed us as a studio in the direction of getting noticed internationally. These productions really kind of tested our pipeline, tested our abilities and skills as artists. And these are some of the productions where we did world building or hyenas in the photo reel and interacting with people. I'll later kind of go into the further details of breaking down the workflows and how we went about doing these productions. And then world building in the sense of building a future dystopian city in London, maybe making shark surf. That was also quite a fun production. Or making robotics or android characters fully integrated into the worlds or environments, feeling that they belong in this world. Productions where we needed to construct completely from the ground up, fully CG integrated worlds. This was for a production for Lexus. And then, of course, some of our creature work that really got a lot of attention is work where we needed to create photoreal looking creatures being integrated again on a commercial basis. But what goes hand in hand with commercial work is you need to be able to do pretty much feature film quality productions with pretty much a commercial budget, but also in timelines that sometimes sounds ridiculous. And then, of course, on Alex's point, the importance of having TDs on the team is critical, and understanding what a pipeline means to be able to achieve these ridiculous deadlines sometimes when it comes to you have a month to do a photoreal commercial on creature work. So yeah, this just gives you a bit of a sense of the kind of work we do at Chocolate Tribe and the passion we put behind it. We have individuals that's come from even working at the mall, Rob van der Bracht, like he's worked at Cine Sites and international studios and learned a lot from those experience and brought it to South Africa and really embedded that workflows and mindsets within the actual Chocolate Tribe workflow. So when it comes to 3D environments, Matt, if you don't mind playing me the next clip, it's just going to give you guys a sense of the behind the scenes on some of the world builds and the set extensions that we do here as well. Thanks, Matt. Awesome. Thanks, Matt. So yeah, like what one thing that really stands out for us is obviously the thing that always being shared across the board on all this kind of work you just seen is there's a common thread that always happens on all these productions, and they all require creatures, buildings, digital assets, integration, and the biggest thing that makes them all really tick very well together is a proper thought through pipeline. So when it comes to some of these productions, some of them require very complex assets where you need to build a whole city, where in some cases you need to do a creature that requires you to do muscle simulation, first simulations, and a lot of those kind of level of integration that also requires a pipeline to be optimized. And on all these fronts, on these assets and things you build, you need to be able to integrate this into an environment that feels believable. And actually, if you are working on live action plates, to be able to feel that the 3D element is not distracting or kind of not feeling like it's belonging in that world. And that's where world creation and VFX production really meets in the middle. And it's a super fun and very complex workflow that requires, of course, as I mentioned, the pipeline. So pipelines, it's messy. It's like life. Like you've got all these different layers and all these different elements that needs to come together and communicate amongst each other. So from your concept drawings to storyboards, pushing it through to different departments, to the modeling artist, the rigging team, the caching team, the layout team, the animation team, it's messy. So without a pipeline, it's a nightmare because trying to manage all this extremely amount of assets and data by doing this manually would be a hideous task. And of course, you're also dealing with artists in between all this and understanding that an artist has got their needs. They have a set of tools they need to work with. And without not having access to these tools within a pipeline or the ability to freely move between different software without compromising the asset or actually the asset moving along the pipeline, that is problematic. So for us, we're really passionate about this side of making sure that your pipeline don't end up looking like a sketch or a kind of a layout that's very confusing and no one's understanding what's going on. So these are some examples of common workflows that people always would kind of outline and kind of give an indication of different departments and how people would communicate. But we need a system that really kind of hits home when it comes to making this happen. So when it comes to the onset, there's a starting point when it comes to VFX and these kind of productions. You need to gather as much as information as you can from the onset experience. So if you're doing a feature film or series where visual effects are required, you do have a set of little tick marks you need to kind of run by for you to be able to give the artist on the studio side the most information possible to capture what's usable to integrate that asset or that prop properly. For example, typical examples of this would be HDR captures, reference photos of the asset that needs to be placed in scene, camera metadata, so the lenses, LiDAR scans if possible, if the production allows it. If not, lately cell phones are being used for LiDAR scans. Sure, it's not as detailed as your high-end LiDAR for kind of units, but at least it will give you a sense of world scale. And of course, trackers for cameras, plates. A lot of data is being collected on set. And without this information, your VFX artists would be quite lost. And also to integrate those elements within that world just get extremely difficult if you don't have the data. This is just some examples of a production we worked on called The Number with Netflix, where things that was captured on set. As you can see, there was an example of this stuffy kind of animal, or like we printed or 3D printed this stand-in kind of asset to assist us in seeing what the fur would look like when the light hits it. What's the eye line of the performance of the actors when they perform towards this character? And also just to be able to give the art department a sense of scale of what this thing's going to look like at the end of the day. Elements that we look into when we collect data on set is obviously there is photogrammetry, sometimes with drones required. If you need to do a world build that's beyond, let's say, the asset of that hyena. If you need to do a town that you need to do set extensions on to actually grow and build beyond the boundaries of what the camera could see. Photogrammetry with drones is extremely powerful, and there's different techniques that's been evolved over the years. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the light stages. You've probably seen some examples of that when it comes to actors and capturing a likeness of the character to make a digit double. These are just examples of tools that we normally would use when we try to integrate 3D elements and characters into the world. Photogrammetry, nerves, and Gaussian splatting has obviously been introduced recently in the years, and obviously the results are speaking for itself. Gaussian splatting has been kind of leading the way on be able to capture quite very high detailed kind of scenes, especially on a big scale. And we've recently used this in a few productions, and it's really been promising. There's been research papers also done on obviously using animated Gaussian splatters, and that will also change the game again on how you could probably use it for training AI data sets for within your production, but maybe also creating bigger scenes like crowd scenes. There's many ways to apply this, and we're just at the tip of the iceberg, to be honest, of where things are going. So very exciting times. And as an artist, as a 2D artist, and also in the VFX industry, we're always excited about the new tools that's coming our way and to be relevant and up to par to what's happening out there. So another critical point when it comes to having the world integration working seamlessly is a big part that's called match moving and camera tracking. So if the guys are not aware of what this is, this means that you need to match a performance of a character, for example, at the bottom robot on Scarecrow, the performance of an actor to match the body double of the CG version of it, so to say, in situ. This is a production where we needed to do almost 128 shots of just match moving frame by frame, of course, the performance of the artist, and then render a version of the android character. And of course, the Scarecrow was his head replacement. And then, of course, when it comes to your environments, you need to obviously be able to replace buildings, do set extensions, add fire, add tents, whatever you need to do. There's so many ways you can do this. But one thing we've learned over the years is if your camera track or your solve is not sitting properly, obviously it's a dead giveaway that you haven't done a proper integration. So when it comes to tracking and match moving, you can almost have with a basic gray block get amazing results by just looking at it when it's properly tracked. You can just feel like it belongs in that world. So a critical part in doing world building, especially on set extensions, is to ensure that your tracking and your integration of your lens information is properly done. So on that note, I know I'm rushing through these elements, but there's a lot of things that goes in when it comes to world building. And of course, one of the biggest ones is the asset creation process. Now, on this level, you need to be able to, it all depends on the production, but when it comes to VFX, we always strive for realism and realistic kind of results. The thing about an asset that makes it feel real is the imperfections. The real world is not perfect. CG sometimes is a dead giveaway when you have these perfect lines and these perfect textures. And we've seen over the years the evolution of how textures and the lighting techniques has improved over the years to really hone in on the level of detail of what world or the reality is like. And the tools have definitely evolved over the years from the traditional, almost purely texturing in Photoshop to where we today with Substance Painter, Mari, and tools and PBS kind of shaders that can be automated and procedurally generated, makes life a lot better and easier to get that asset to really bring it home and sit within that world. So on that note, when it comes to an asset that needs to be created from scratch, sometimes your first point of reference would be the reference. So on the Hyena production we worked on, it was critical for us to get as much references that the director was pointing out on details that he liked about the Hyena, the way the character would behave, and of course the imperfections that makes him unique. So on this production, on a number, we were kind of pushed to get this gnarly looking character, but also almost picking out from the references of what the director liked. So making a photoreal character or asset, it requires you to really do your research and your integration for that to be proper. The research is key. And when it comes to obviously your sculpting artists and the people involved in this production, it requires them to also be very skilled. And obviously the tools are moving and growing rapidly. As we see, we can even generate procedural textures with AI lately, but also you can get a bit more higher resolution out of those kind of stencils and the brushes that you want to play with. So on this production, obviously we go through the typical workflow of doing the sculpt, getting those steps approved, getting into the retopologizing of the character so it's ready to be rigged and built. We also build an anatomy accurate kind of model of this character, and then of course the texturing and shading that needs to be done and tested countless times and improved every single iteration we work on. And of course, the rigging setup, so the animators can work in parallel, rigging this, playing with the character, test the limitations of the rig, see how far you can push this. And then, of course, encapsulating all this information, you need to be able to have a pipeline that enables you to save all these assets in a proper way that it's usable and reusable in different software. So I'm just outlining the basics at the moment. We can obviously talk forever about all the details that goes into these pipelines, but I just want to give you a bit of a taste of what the effort is that you need to put in to make these asset builds effective and fast. So when it comes to, for us at Chocolate Tribe, we love the USD workflows. It's really enabled us to handle a lot more complex assets, a lot more bigger world builds. For example, on some of the productions we need to build cities, it was so much easier for us to diversify the type of tools we can use on this, and USD being a very universal workflow, and enabled us to have multiple artists from different kind of backgrounds to be able to be participating within the actual production itself. So even we had artists from ArcViz companies that would join us to do the architectural developments, and we can grab that asset, pull it into Maya, render in Arnold, or output it to Unreal Engine if need be. The USD workflow really changed the way we would work within our pipeline. And it's a critical part, I would say, for any production if you're looking at big scale asset development and world building workflows. Of course, hand in hand going with this asset development process is obviously the look dev and lighting and rendering process that you need to go through. So for the guys who are not familiar with this is a process where you will have look dev TDs, but also lighting artists going through the ropes of making sure that data was collected on set to be able to get those HDRs, put them in a scene in 3D, and start pulling in those assets that was created and start seeing how they can match the lighting and the look and feel, so it feels properly integrated into your plate that was provided on set. And of course, over the years, this technology has evolved quite rapidly and dramatically, because with ray tracing and path tracing in the past and the different techniques. The early days with Mental Ray, V-Ray, Arnold, Maxwell, 3D Delight, there's so many different tools over the years. The revolution was rapid and extreme. But the thing that really kind of helped us to really accelerate it, this is of course moving into GPU rendering. I'm sure you guys can relate. That's worked on previous CPU rendering tools. It was tedious, very slow, and you probably wasted half your day waiting for really good high-end renders to come through. And of course, the evolution has even pushed us even further, where we actually in the stage where it's pretty much real time these days. So exciting times for us as VFX artists, because obviously you always want to strive for that real time almost feedback, because then you can make really informed decisions and fast corrections on the fly. Obviously the pushing of physically based shading has definitely changed the way we would work within our pipeline, and especially for the look dev artists to be able to a degree, pretty much get a real-time feedback on your shading and your shading techniques. And this has not been a new thing. It's just it's definitely changed the way you would do your kind of asset creation process, especially when it comes to texturing and shading. And of course, Material X being again similar, very well integrated into USD, it just changed the way you look at making you're not tied to a render engine. And I think that's a critical part when it comes to bigger scale productions. Sometimes within a production, we find ourselves, even at the last minute, we need to jump between render engines. And if you kind of tied yourself into a shading network that's unfortunately, let's say, only for Arnold, and you need to jump to Redshift, as a TD, you'll need to write a little script to be able to translate those shaders. But if you just work in Material X, to be able to jump between these different CCDs, it immediately enables you to make informed decisions very quickly. Even on the deadline, you can make a kind of major adjustments and not be affected by reshading the whole world or kind of rebuilding your shader networks. So Material X, critical part within a pipeline, especially when it comes to world creation or any form of asset, I would say. And of course, VFX is not VFX without integrating dust, cloth, debris, physics, liquid, you name it. All those things go hand in hand, and liquid and muscle dynamics with integrating or mimicking reality. And that's the thing you do as a VFX artist. You really kind of observe life around you super close, and you really do a lot of intense studies of how things work. How does water work on a bigger scale? How does it work on a small scale? Like, you can't just throw something in and think it's just going to work because the simulation is set up to just solve all your problems. There's a lot of time that goes into the VFX side of things, and especially when it comes to simulations. Simulations has also moved along in a drastic way in the last few years, also GPU-based simulations, if you guys can relate. There's been in the past, obviously, the tedious process of also doing simulations of fluids. It will take forever, and like RealFlow in the past was a typical tool you would go to, or Houdini for big scale water simulations. It's still the better solution if your production allows it, but when you're on a very tight deadline or a very tight budget, sometimes the GPU solutions can give you the same results and a lot faster turnaround time. But this all said, these little VFX elements, or the simulations, is so to say, is the thing that really sometimes grounds an asset within the real world. So if a bear is walking in the snow, you want to see the snow being disrupted. Or if you see a creature running through the desert, you want to see the sand kicking up and all the things interacting with him. That's what's making him part of that world. So without having that integration of the effects and the elements and the layers, you actually end up with something that looks very fake and it doesn't feel properly integrated. And with all these elements I just briefly touched on, it all trickles down to the compositor at the end of the day that brings all these elements together. And obviously tools like Nuke has been very well been used, and a lot of compositing tools that sometimes even integrate like within Blender. It makes the artist able to take all these elements that I just discussed and actually build a scene that feels properly integrated and seamless, blending in with the plate and the interaction of the character or the person in that world. And we've seen this countless times in all our latest forms and the favorite forms. And sometimes I think you can sometimes spot it quite quickly when you can see budget was limited or time was limited, because sometimes that integration process doesn't allow people to have that flexibility on spending more time of making the world or the lighting or the dust particles or the simulations or the character animation to be more refined. And we are entering a world where it's a race against time. AI is definitely challenging all of us on that front. But AI is just a tool again, and it really helps us to maybe assist us as VFX artists to move faster and more rapidly through tedious processes that would have taken time, and we can focus more on the crafting, on making the integration more real and more physical. And on top of all of this stuff that I just briefly mentioned, there's the feedback loop. That's such a critical part within this world. We obviously, within our kind of studio, we use tools like Kitsu. We've used Ftract in the past. We use Frame.io, of course, for client approvals and feedback loop from our clients. And of course, Prism has been a great kind of tool that we use as a pipeline managing our assets. Richard, the creator, we've kind of worked with him many years, and we've developed tools even for Prism with him. And it's always been a pleasure to see the energy and the excitement behind Richard's development for improving this tool ever since. Always excited about seeing how the artists can get direct feedback faster, and that feedback loop, the sooner you can improve that, the more detail you can get into optimizing the scene and getting to the artistry and not struggle with communication. Because I think the biggest gap in some productions is when there's no clear communication between the artist and the director, or the production team and the guys who's actually on the ground physically doing the work. And these tools are essential for any artist or studio to have part of in their production. On another front, to obviously segue away from the previous workflows, is obviously the thing in the room. It's Unreal Engine that's really changed the way we look at real-time workflows. And Unreal Engine is definitely shown and proven itself to be a formidable tool, even though it's made for games. VFX industries obviously saw in the last few years the massive improvements on actually getting real-time feedback in your viewport of world builds in massive scale, especially with Nanite and Lumen being introduced into Unreal. It definitely is a game changer on thinking about how you handle your assets and how complex you can go in the scene. So we obviously, even in all different mediums within the industry, even in the ArcViz as well as VFX as well as game and all these different disciplines, you see a massive improvement on how people can build massive scales and worlds that feels very integrated. So as another clip, Matt, if you don't mind playing, is a clip that really inspired me. It's not from us as Chocolate Tribe, but it was an amazing clip that really kind of honed in on where we're going, where you can see the integration of all these elements I discussed, of a proper lighting model and a proper shader model to look extremely photoreal. Thanks. I'm sure you guys are familiar with it. I've maybe seen it somewhere. Some people think it's just a TikTok clip. It's not. This is a fully CG world. And the level of integration and lighting improvements, like when I saw this the first time, I was over the moon to see that this is how far we've come, because you can just see the way the light plays on the Windows planes, the way the world integration looks like, and the way everything is just seamlessly feeling real. And of course, sound design plays a role in that one. But yeah, it's super fun to see where we're going with world building. So on that front, we obviously got inspired by that, and we jumped onto a production where we're like, let's just do one shot and see if we can just build this world in Unreal. It was for a commercial, and we immediately fell in love with the speed and the process of how you can go about building these worlds so fast and so rapid, and the feedback loop is a critical part. So if you guys ever want to look into building the bigger scale things a lot faster, and maybe even for your very high-end previews, we've seen a lot of the previews these days look better than it used to be in the past, where there's so much more detail in your previews sometimes where you can say, hey, that's almost finally rendered. But this is the world we're living in, and that's actually quite exciting to see that you can, at early stages within your production, get quite far down the line on even working in parallel as you do almost your previews and your blocking and your shot setups. You can see artists real-time update the assets while you're working on it. And this is where Unreal also is a very powerful tool, where you can have multiple users share the same scene real-time, and you can almost see this little guy flying around and busy with his asset updates. And that's, for me, always been a great way to see the collaboration between artists to build a set that could be sold photoreal. So yeah, this is one of the productions we played on, and another really challenging production that really pushed us, like I mentioned before, was the Hyena production with Inamba Number, and this is where the real world meets the 3D world. And for us, this was a proper challenge because interaction with 3D characters is never easy. When it comes to interacting between the performance and the 3D character, you need to get the hand contacts working. You need to have the characters in the muscle simulation to react to the character's behavior and the performance from the artist. And of course, all the layers that needs to be added to this. This is just a simple example of some of the simulation passes and fur passes and fur simulation and lighting setups that's gone into making this one shot, and how much artistry goes into, and how many people are involved in getting something from a plate that had a green guy running around into a final shot that, of course, looks very well integrated, and very exciting to see that you made this creature from nothing, and the integration process is the fun side of it. Again, on this side, you have dust kicking up. Maybe if the character would get bitten, you have blood or saliva. We had saliva to this character to kind of drop on her face. It's all those little imperfections and layers that really sells this. And then another case study I just want to briefly bring up is a production that we got approached through lockdown. So everyone, the whole world was in lockdown, and suddenly we had this dilemma where a client was needing for us to, first of all, bring Muhammad Ali back to life, a digidouble. Of course, unfortunately, not having great references of him in his prime. For us to generate a digidouble of Muhammad Ali was a big challenge, and a lot of research went into this production. And the fact that we were in lockdown, we were not allowed to go on set or shoot anything. So for a world build and a kind of a character build process, this was extremely challenging, because suddenly we need to build a whole set in 3D, of course, that feels photoreal, and then, of course, as well as the character that's integrated. And Matt, if you don't mind playing the breakdown for me on the Showmax clip. Thanks so much. Thank you, Matt. So to come to a conclusion, obviously there's a lot of ground we've covered, but to kind of look at the bigger picture of what it requires for you to build a 3D environment as well as integration, there's a lot of effort, a lot of talent that goes into this, and a lot of man hours. And you need to understand that there's so many different departments and so many different layers that goes into it that to actually skimp on anything within the production could really be the downfall of some productions. And that's why we always lean strongly on developing a really robust and solid pipeline for you to be enabling your artists to actually do the crafting and the artistry behind it in more detail, and give them the ability to get feedback real time, and just to be able to deliver something at the highest caliber that's possible. So on that note, I've noticed our time was a bit limited, but there's also a big initiative, because in South Africa, there's a lot of young talent, as I was mentioning, and we as mentors, but as well as kind of people who wants to train up the next generation, we're very passionate about sharing our knowledge with the world, of course, but also with the younger generation in Africa. And this is where an initiative got born from Nosipho van der Brast kind of idea of bringing an event similar to ICE, of sharing the knowledge freely to the public, and it's called Avijosi. And Matt, we had the privilege of having you at the event last year, and it was fantastic to have you part of that. And I just want to share a snippet of the event itself, and also the impact that we want to make locally. And we would love to get more internationals involved in this event and make sure that we can get as much knowledge being shared across the board locally, but also internationally. So Avijosi being the brainchild of Nosipho, but also the actual beginning of where Chocolate Tribe was kind of a partner or the main sponsor of this with Netflix initially. We are pushing forward on making a difference in our local communities, but also hoping to the next generation to kind of see what's available as a career path for them within the VFX and animation industry. So Matt, if you don't mind that promo video, and then we can go to Q&As. Thank you.
Missed the last 3 Avijosi events? We got you. Avijosi 25, the animation, film, gaming, and interactive tech event is back. Brought to you by Chocolate Tribe. Join local and internationally acclaimed directors, scriptwriters, producers, animators, VFX supervisors, and industry pioneers. From September 13 to 14, experience Africa's only free 2-day creative event. Let's connect, collaborate, and create at Avijosi 2025. For more information, visit avijosi.com.
Thank you so much, Matt. And just to put emphasis on that, it was such a pleasure to have you there. And you can already, I'm sure, kind of share with the audience of just how energizing, how exciting it is to be able to share our knowledge with the upcoming generations. So if you guys are interested, we would love to have you involved. Even have a look at our website, obviously from Avijosi. And if you want to get in touch with Nossi, you're more than welcome to give her a shout and see how you can get involved and even learn from the event. And we're obviously planning to do our utmost best to be able to share everything about the event before and after the event will take place in September. So thank you so much for everyone's time, and to be able to have this platform to kind of share the work we do at Chocolate Tribe as well as Avijosi. And yeah, if there's any questions, you guys are more than welcome to fire away.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for all of the inputs and sharing all the love. Yeah. So yes, also to everybody, I can highly recommend because I've been at Avijosi last year, so I can highly recommend to do that and to go there. Fantastic vibes and amazing food. Yeah. So there were some, or I've seen a question before, and I think there's also another one that just came in. Let me check. So Canva actually asked, on the Chocolate Tribe showreel there was an animated movie. May I please get the name of it? And that it had a futuristic look to it.
Sure. It's pretty much an anthology with Disney Plus that we worked on, and the feature or the clip that we worked on, or the movie we worked on, was called Surf Sangoma, and it was from the Kazazimoto kind of franchise. So it was an anthology of films done in Africa and themed for Africa. So yeah, there you go. You can have a look at Disney Plus, and you'll be able to find it immediately there. And you can also find it on our website. We have a link there if you need to have a look. Yeah, that was fun.
Very cool. So I got another question right here. So, hi Tiaan, thanks for the great presentation. I'm a local 3D artist in the Johannesburg area, and I'm likewise passionate about the potential South Africa has to offer in the creative industry. I have 2 to 3 years of experience in the freelance marketplace, creating full PBR pipeline assets, high poly all the way through to rigging and animation for general animation and video games. That sounds cool. I'll cut straight to the point. I'm looking to contribute it in a studio position. How do I get on your radar in a real and impactful way?
Of course, yeah. Look, we have our info@Chocolate Tribe email. Like we normally jump it immediately. So if you want to apply and just meeting up with us, I would always recommend even meeting us in person. So we quite an open door with that. So happy to have you guys come over and say hi. You can easily make an appointment, and we can run you through the studio and just the work we do. So super happy to include and have you guys come over and see what we do.
It's very cool. I like to connect people, so fantastic.
Yeah, look at you. Thanks, man.
Connecting people from South Africa to companies in South Africa. That's how we roll. Very cool.
But we're here.
Yeah. That's super amazing. Yeah, so I mean, time is flying. Let me. I had a note with a comment before with something. I cannot find it. With a question which I had, but so if just for the audience, if there are more questions, just put them in the chat or in the questions. Yeah. Let me ask one thing from my side. Then we have to sadly move on. So in the in the production of, or let's say for the production of all of these different, let's say, techniques and technologies that are or for game technologies, and I mean, you mentioned everything from sculpting to rigging to simulation and so on. How is it, or what's the mindset in the sense of, and I mean, I briefly talked also to Rob about this, but which you mentioned also before, who's working, or he's also one of the founders of the Chocolate Tribe. But in what I just got reminded of this, you guys have such a wider range of doing cartoony looking things, like full feature, like high quality, like production work for movies, for shorts, for advertisements, for all sorts of different things. That's like stretching a production pipeline to the brink. What's your reasoning of, let's say, going in this direction so hard to be able to pretty much force yourselves to be able to do everything? Is this the South African grind set of let's do everything, or because it's risky, right?
Yeah.
Where does this come from?
Sure. No, where it come from, that's kind of you kind of hit the nail on the head regarding, it's a very South African thing sometimes, because we tend to wear many hats. And in early stages of South Africa's film and animation commercial industry, there weren't a lot of artists around. And understandably, you'll have a lot of generalists and not a lot of specialists. And as the industry's grown over the years, it's definitely formed a lot of specialists finally. So we are kind of seeing a lot of artists coming from industry that's a specialist, like a grooming artist purely focusing on grooming, and a lighting TD, and whatever the case is. And in the past, it didn't allow us to do this. So the workaround we would find was to really optimize the pipeline. So if you can optimize your pipeline to such an extent that you can handle multiple things in parallel, you can easily accelerate the turnout time. On Robot and Scarecrow especially, we were a very small strike team. So we were like 4 people mainly working on that production. It was 128 shots. They were fully rotomated robots to the face of the Scarecrow. And all those elements needed to be able to run in parallel. We actually had a director over from the UK to come and visit us, and he was like, "Where's the team? How do you guys manage to turn this around?" And the reality on the ground is just trying to work smarter rather than just brute force it. And I think that was a very important part. And from that production, we've done multiple productions after that, quite pretty much as we wrapped up Robot and Scarecrow. Rob and I did just a little test with that Lego animation we did. And the 2 of us managed to turn that around in 8 days, from having nothing to a finished product that was almost 2 minutes long within 8 days. And it was because we've had a good understanding of how to save our assets. How do you optimize your assets? How do you move the assets fast backwards and forwards between it? So South Africa, we do have a very grit approach sometimes to how we do our productions. That's what's probably making us very versatile in a production, to be able to jump between different departments and almost need to be a jack of all trades. But on that note, it's also learned us how to really optimize our resources. So when it comes to commercials, and like you said, the diversity of type of productions we're doing, we will always see a shot as a shot. If it's for an animated clip, or if it's for a blockbuster feature, or if it's for a series shot, we treat shots individually, and we give the most attention to a shot, and we deal it as a shot deliverable, not as the whole show. So by breaking the problem down into smaller, manageable pieces, suddenly we accelerate a lot faster at doing these productions. And of course, your key asset is also your people, who you're working with. You need to trust them, to be able to entrust them in knowing they can deliver, especially under high pressure conditions. You need people to be able to think on their feet, as well as sometimes that's the benefit of being a smaller studio, because it allows you to actually quickly communicate and shuffle. I'm sure the likings of the lot bigger studios like your Waiters and your Cinesat, they have a machine to run of thousands of people, and I think it's a different approach on that front. But I think the lean and mean approach is probably why we operate the way. Yeah.
Nice. Sweet. So there was another question coming in from Scutazo. Hi there, hope you're doing well. I would like to ask, do you guys offer shadow days for a class of students who are studying animation?
Yes, we do. We actually at Chocolate Tribe, we have every Friday we do training, and that's like a set thing. But we also allow job shadowing to come through. So we allocate a lot of time through the week for a lot of students from school all the way up to varsity level to come through. We also have an intern program. So there's a 2-week intern program we've kind of kicked off a few years back already, and we've seen the fruits and the benefits of it. Because what it allows them to do is, a lot of artists don't believe that they can deliver sometimes finished shots or work. And there's this beautiful challenge where we give the guys a preset camera and a preset environment, but they're allowed to do whatever they want in it, but then they can't change the length of the clip and the camera. And it allows them to really explore their skill set and their actual ability. So if you a rigging artist, you can show off a little bit of rigging with the character that's moving and animating. If you a concept artist, you can show off, or a matte painting artist, your backgrounds could be your focal point. So we can then give you guys the ability to actually achieve within 2 weeks a lot more than they would think they're able of delivering. So we've seen this program being very fruitful, and job shadowing is definitely a thing we do at Chocolate Tribe.
Very, very cool. So there were two more questions. The thing is, we may be able to ask them afterwards, but the thing is, time is flying at the moment.
It is, yeah.
But any of the questions which you cannot answer today, I'll obviously forward to the Chocolate Tribe.